According to the Department of Agriculture, there were about 925,000 Black-owned farms in this country in 1920. Over the intervening century, this number dropped by about 95%. And according to the Center for American Progress, the farmland area itself owned by these farmers was reduced by about 80%, often due to the lack of access to loans or insurance for the crops. There have been pretty egregious examples of overt racism even within the seed community. Stein Seed Company, whom we've promised to never profile, got in legal trouble for allegedly deliberately selling inferior soybean seed to Black farmers in the Memphis area. That was in 2018. So this is now. I think Allison and I would agree we have no standing to talk with authority on anything that is happening in our country, in our world right now, but it seems like we could not say something. So I'll say this. If you get a chance, you should check out your local Black-owned farm, information about which is readily available with a quick Google search. You can also check out, if you're in our general area, the Southeastern African American Farmers Organic Network, which is saafon.org, saafon.org. Or also the Black Farmers Network, which is backed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Whatever is left of that these days, I'm not sure which uniquely unqualified crony has been put in charge of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. If it is like the head of other federal agencies, it would be former CEO of a company that has dumped sludge onto farms, or so a pesticide producer, perhaps. I think it still exists. Next episode's catalog, incidentally, which will go up on July 10th, will be True Love Seeds, which is a Philadelphia-based company that works closely with a number of Black-owned farms in Philadelphia and New England, and is actually one of only 2 companies I've seen. I did a pretty exhaustive search for this that has thoughtfully compiled a collection of African-American heritage seeds, curated, I would say. The other is another Philadelphia company, which is Landreths. Today we're actually going to look at the 1920 Landreths Seed catalog, which was published in the year when there were still nearly 1 million Black-owned farms nationwide.
It's seedy business. It's seedy business.
Do you know whether that lawsuit is ongoing or has been?
They were in mediation talks that broke down, and that was the last news that I know about it.
Well, the company has investigated itself and found no evidence of wrongdoing.
Yeah,
so I
they
guess
love
that
to do that.
I guess that settles that.
Yeah. Companies love to investigate themselves. It's their favorite way to make sure that justice is served. Well, we continue our descent into this toilet of a year.
Let's not start that way. Everybody's looking for some distraction.
Oh, okay, relief.
Right?
We're going the relief route. Allison, what's in the garden?
Okay, to be honest.
Oh, no. So this is not... Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Then let us cultivate our garden. It's the only way to make life endurable.
What's in the garden?
Things have gotten kind of weird out in the garden in the last couple of weeks because I have just gotten very busy with work in a way that is not leaving me a lot of time for trying to recover from the mowing incident. I haven't replanted anything.
Yeah, there's also and maybe this is just true of this area of Florida, but there were like 2 months where it didn't rain at all, and then now it's downpouring all the time for weeks, and I feel like that isn't a good way to grow healthy things.
Well, it's a crushing amount of rain,
Yeah.
actually. So things are getting physically damaged
Right,
by
by
the
the
amount of.
mechanical nature.
Yeah. So, I mean, everything is just sort of untended and wild and not very good right now in the garden.
So the tomato plants are flowering.
That's true.
Like,
and I think I see some little baby cherry tomatoes.
oh, are there on there?
I think so.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's exciting. I mean, we've continued to occasionally eat green beans. There are salad greens, I think. They may have gotten fucked up.
A lot of the salad greens got really waterlogged
Mhm.
and became nasty in a
Mhm.
way that I've actually never encountered in my previous gardening experience.
There is a single daddle pepper. I don't know if you've noticed that. One daddle pepper.
There are two. There
Are
are
there?
two fruits on that pepper plant.
Okay.
And so it seems like it's trying anyway.
Well, you gotta munch those while the munchin's good.
Yeah, I guess we should put them in something.
What about the stuff in the backyard, but that has not been mowed?
Well, the stuff that has not been mowed is in pots. I mean, that's where the greens have gotten the most destroyed
Huh.
by the pounding rain. I do think we're going to have an opportunity to make pesto, which I would really like to do.
We've made arugula pesto and basil pesto in the past.
We might have enough basil to do a nice batch of basil pesto. The arugula's suffered the most water damage, which arugula has always been.
And that's our staple crop, basically.
Yeah, it's really easy to grow. It's really tough. It's almost impossible to kill it. It just grows itself.
Yeah.
But not here.
Yeah.
Not right now.
So the only way we could defeat this is to, over the course of each and every day, to run outside and take pots under the awning and then put them back out and take pots under the awning again and put them back out. That's the way you have to do gardening here, apparently.
I mean, I'm sure there's a solution. And if we could put in garden beds that would be protected and not be mowed down, maybe I would come up with some kind of a covering system. But since everything's in pots, and I don't know, not that great to begin with.
Wow, we're huge disappointments.
Yeah, it's... At the moment, things are not great in the garden.
Yeah, well, the issue with the garden, is basically that we're both working full-time again, because we're in Florida where coronavirus is over, so...
Yeah, everything's fine here, so that's the good news.
Yeah, so you get to go and interact widely with maskless public, at least in my workplace.
I am at least in a workplace where everyone is wearing a mask all the time, which is great.
Remarkable. Well, I guess when we get sick, we'll have time to be in the garden.
No, I don't think that's right.
Oh. Okay. So today's catalog is our first vintage catalog.
I'm very excited about this.
I am also.
You picked this out, and I think it's a great idea.
I think occasionally it would be fun to look at catalogs from different eras. Like, I think it would be fun to look at ones from the 80s, the 70s, and 80s. But we thought for the first of these, we would go with Landreths, which is the oldest seed company in this country. They were founded in 1784 in Philadelphia. They've been in operation nonstop since then. And the catalog in particular, we thought we'd do 100 years ago. So we got a copy of the 1920 Landreths Seed catalog. And for such a venerable company that continues to be in existence, their web presence is pretty sad, I've got to say. I don't know if you've taken a look at it.
You mentioned that to me, and I went to their website quickly, and you're right that it seems like they last updated their content in 2019. So
Mhm.
I don't know if that means the person in charge of their website left and they didn't replace them.
Seems like a lot of their stock is listed as out of stock, but that could just be how things are for everybody right now.
Well, that's probably true for a lot of seed companies, but you also said that they have moved recently.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how recent it is, but they moved to Vermont. Yeah, but it's a pretty bare bones website. You would think that they would make a fucking huge deal that they were founded less than 10 years after the founding of this nation in the city of Philadelphia, but that, largely goes unnoted.
Well, I mean, the cover of the 1920 catalog has a drawing of a it's even captioned. It says colonial boy with basket of vegetables grown from Landreths seeds, and it says copyrighted on it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly 100 years ago, they were very into their lineage. It's amazing to see on this catalog from 100 years ago on the cover, founded 136 years ago. I mean, I guess, in this country, we have a inflated sense of what constitutes oldness, like something being 250 years old or whatever. If we lived in most other places in the world, probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. But here it really blows my mind.
Yeah, that's true. If we lived in another country, a company that has been making lace or whatever for the last 700 years
Yeah.
might not be.
That unusual. Let me try to describe the cover of this in even more vivid detail. This colonial boy,
He looks ready to back sass.
let me just put it this way. If he were a statue right now, someone would be cutting his head off or dragging it into a river at this moment.
Let's just actually describe him a little bit. He's wearing a 3-corner cap.
He's
He
got
has-
classic buckle shoes.
He's got those pilgrim buckle shoes with the high heels. He's got an ascot.
Mm-hmm.
He's got his breeches.
Is that an
tucked-
ascot or a dickie?
That's an ascot.
Okay, I'm unclear on the distinction.
A dickie is like you know what a turtleneck is, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if you just cut the neck and chest out of a turtleneck.
Is that a thing?
That's a dickie.
During what era were those most popular?
Well, I think the 70s.
Okay. Little colonial boys didn't wear dickies.
I mean, maybe a dickie also means something else.
No, I
but,
think you're right.
but this is, I mean, maybe this isn't an ascot either, but it's some sort of a tie, a
Mm.
loose scarf tied around his neck in the manner of a necktie.
He has what I would describe as unusually muscular forearms for a little boy that have come from carrying the overflowing baskets of what appear to be cabbages, corn, and beets. Maybe carrots.
Maybe turnips. I'm
Maybe
not sure.
turnips, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to say how old he's supposed to be, but I would say he looks like he would sass you back.
Yeah, I guess so. If it wasn't labeled colonial boy copyrighted, I would guess that this were an elderly person.
That doesn't make any sense at all. This is obviously not an elderly person.
All right. Well, as you enter the catalog, the first thing you get is sort of ordering information. They make it clear that for some things that they will ship you, they will pay the postage. For other things, they expect you to pay the postage. They have, I don't know, when you order things online right now, if UPS is shipping an item you've ordered, you can go and see a map of how many days it will take it to reach you, depending on where you live and where it's coming from. Here, there's a parcel post rate map. Speaking of institutions that no longer exist or may no longer exist in the immediate future, the post office. But they will, ship anywhere in the continental United States. There are a series of concentric circles, the center of which is Philadelphia, the greatest city in the country. And they apparently 100 years ago were shipping their seeds everywhere.
Yeah, and so each zone that you travel outward from Philadelphia, there's a different per pound rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's worth noting that They make a distinction between industrial orders and family orders. If you're a family gardener ordering seeds by mail, they want you to add postage on peas, beans, and corn.
Yeah, they have a category of heavy seeds.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to call attention to this. This is still in the front matter. It says invitation. And it says on page 4 is an illustration of Landreth's new seed house. And it goes on to talk about how great their seed house is. And it says family gardeners planting seeds, especially of other seed establishments, are cordially asked and pressed to visit the Landreths Seed house to observe for themselves and on the spot the facilities for storing and packing seeds, and if they have time, also to visit the Landreth trial grounds.
Do you know what their big competitors were during this era?
Burpee?
Burpee, yeah. Looks like Burpee is a late 19th century company. That's when I forget what his name is. Alfred Burpee, I want to say, something like that. Founded that company.
Oh, yeah. It even says actually how things get delivered by railroad or steamer. So I guess some things might have gone by ship. It's okay, wait. It actually says right here in these words, the United States mail brings Landreths seeds to every man's door. First, see if your merchant sells Landreths seeds. If not, then mail your order direct to the D. Landreth Seed Company. So
that's amazing. Before we get into the seed descriptions themselves, I think I want to read the page near the front titled Seed Testing for Vitality and Purity. Come see how it is done by Landreth after an experience in trial grounds of 136 years. And I promise I will only do this with this section, but I've been dying to read a portion of this in a voice I associate with the 1920s. It will be observed that in the testing of garden seeds, there are two standards aimed at: sprouting power and quality of crop. And it may be remarked that each are equally important. That's mutating into a weirder and weirder voice. A want of vitality or sprouting power in the first place defeats the object of the gardener, as without vitality he does not have a crop. While on the second hand, by a want of quality, his efforts are also defeated if the character of the crop raised after his months of labor and patience prove to be mixed or bad. Really, he had better plant unvital seeds in the first instance and save his labors, expensive disappointments, and avoid the ridicule of his neighbors.
I mean, I'm really into the idea that your neighbors will ridicule you for having a poor tomato crop.
Yeah, I could see people in our neighborhood ridiculing our gardening.
Well, they don't have gardens.
Yeah, but they would hate us for having one, maybe.
It's hard to say.
Landreth seeds are tested both ways, for vitality and quality. For vitality, principally under glass, but largely too in the open garden to find out how many seeds in 100 germinate. In a few cases up to 100. On an average, say 90. While 80 may be considered good. I mean, they're saying that on average, 90 out of 100 of their seeds germinate, which is a incredible rate if true. I assume it's a marketing lie.
To be honest, I don't know. I mean, like, when I plant peas, I think very close to 100 of them, 100% of them probably germinate. I mean, I haven't actually written down exactly how many pea seeds I planted versus how many shoots appeared,
Sure.
But it seems like with some types of seeds, a very high germination rate is not.
But you'd have to think
unusual.
that over the last 100 years, if there's been an improvement in anything, probably in germination rate.
It's not like people weren't artificially selecting seeds before.
Well, for hundreds and hundreds of years, yeah.
Thousands.
Yeah.
Oh, we haven't mentioned their motto, their tagline, which is seeds which succeed.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Pedigree Seeds, an appellation which has for many years been attached to Landreth seeds which succeed. Well, the largest section in this catalog is tomatoes. Do you want to read from the tomatoes section?
When the apple is in bloom, sow in hills 3 feet apart on a warm border early in the spring. For a later supply, sow a short time afterwards in a more open situation. As the plants advance in growth, support them by brushwood. To have the tomato very early, it is necessary to start the plants in a hotbed, or they may be reared in a flower pot in a window and subsequently transplanted. I like the idea. I'm not sure exactly what it means to support them by piling up brushwood versus some other
Trellising method.
It looks like what they mean to support them by brushwood, they mean to use it as a stake. It took me a minute to figure that out, but they actually do have a sort of illustration that's kind of hard to make out, and I think that's what it's depicting.
Tomatoes trained on sticks, as it says.
Oh, wow, it has a caption. Yep, that must be what they meant by brushwood.
In the next paragraph, it again, so it says, for the late crop, the seed may be planted in permanent position when the apple is in bloom. I've noticed going through this catalog that both planting and harvesting time points are frequently given as in relation to apples. Sometimes corn, but most of the time apples. In the first paragraph, it's when the apple is in bloom, sow in hills 3 feet apart. In the second paragraph, for the late crop, the seed may be planted in permanent position when the apple is in bloom. And not only time points, but descriptions of, we've made a lot out of when fruits or vegetables are described as meat in some way. In this catalog, they're very often compared to apples in favorable ways.
I guess an apple was a perennial tree that almost everyone
would
had.
know about, even if they didn't have, and certainly in Philadelphia or in the Northeast.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Chinese giant pepper and also the Bloomsdale extra early pearl onion, and this is just from skimming it, were both described in this catalog as being able to be, quote, eaten raw with the freedom of an apple. Just really bite into that onion.
All right, shall I read Delaware Beauty?
Please.
And for the tomato seeds, these prices include postage. It advises you because those seeds are small. Delaware Beauty. The Delaware Beauty was introduced by Landreth in the autumn of 1912. The following autumn of 1913, we could not fill the demand for seed. A showy, medium-sized red sort, as deep red as Landreth's Red Rock, vine compact, deep green, blight-resistant, thick-stemmed, extraordinarily productive. 1 week later than Chalk's Jewel, 1 week earlier than the Landreth's Red Rock, and 2 weeks earlier than Stone. Fruit smooth all over, almost entirely free from splits, a most distinguishing quality. Very uniform in size and showy. Of a habit of simultaneously coloring up all over the fruit. Shape slightly flattish at bottom end, quite globular at stem or crown end. No depression whatever at stem end, the illustration showing that it is unusually full on top, a most desirable quality, absolutely no waste. Its habit of ripening a good week ahead of the Landreth's Red Rock and 2 weeks ahead of Stone is most desirable. A productive sort has long been looked for to come in ahead of these two late varieties. Canners especially are asked to observe this most profitable character. It, like all other Landreth-grown tomatoes, can only be bought in sealed, lithographed cardboard boxes.
Of a habit of coloring up all over the fruit. There's a picture of it, and it is globular, even compared to any tomato that I see nowadays.
Yeah, the emphasis on the lack of a depression around the stem is interesting to me. It's not a quality I've ever thought too much about.
Yeah, I don't know why that is good or bad. I guess, like in terms of the structural stability of it hanging off the vine, probably that depression is useful.
I don't know that it makes any difference, but it seems like, it could. There's probably someone who knows something about that, but it seems like the reason this is desirable is for processing.
Yeah, when you cut a tomato for the purposes of if you're making a sandwich or whatever, you're slicing a tomato nowadays. How do you deal with the stem portion or the hard fibrous material in the tomato that is around the stem area?
I mean, I usually cut it out.
Yeah, but with Delaware Beauty, there's no need.
Well, I'm sold.
All right, I'm going to read a quick trio of descriptions because they interest me. I'll start with Bonnie Best. The first two of these are going to be very short, and you'll see. Bonnie Best, an early and productive sort, somewhat similar to John Bear. So we'll turn to John Bear now to get a sense of what, in fact, Bonnie Best is, besides an early and productive sort. The John Bear description is a very early sort productive, similar to Chalk's Jewel. So just like a good choose-your-own-adventure book where you have to turn to pages as instructed. To know what a Bonnie's Best is, you have to turn to the John Bear. But to know what either a Bonnie's Best or a John Bear is, you have to then turn to Chalk's Early Jewel. So let's read Chalk's Early Jewel. 10 days later than the Landreth. Much larger globular fruit, smooth skin, flesh bright red, scarlet, and solid. The fruit very free from cracks or any convolutions upon the surface. Vines strong in growth, dark green and very hardy. A good market garden sort. Yeah, it's always been true that, even of course now it's true that when things are early, that's considered good. But I feel like the earliness of things is the primary selling point in all of these descriptions.
Well, people want to extend their harvest season as much as possible. So you want to plant something that will bear fruit early and something that will bear fruit late. And then ideally some things in between there as well. So getting something that's even earlier than whatever the earliest thing you have now extends your season a bit.
I recently made fun of the Burpee's cabbage named Earliana as being a stupid name, but there is in this catalog a tomato also called Earliana. So I guess it's not a modern Burpee trash name. There's a long history.
Landreths Bloomsdale. A wagon load of the Landreths Bloomsdale tomato is as showy as a load of scarlet roses. It ripens 95 to 96 days after the germination of the seed. The Earliana, the earliest tomato of any size, being only a week earlier. But the Earliana is somewhat flat and convoluted, while the Landreths Bloomsdale is far superior, being plump and smooth, and a continuous picker, while the Earliana is not. Nor do we make any comparison whatever between it and the Earliana except alone to indicate its period of ripening, for in tonnage it is at least 50% a larger cropper than the Earliana, consequent upon its ever-bearing quality. It is most admirably adapted for a canner's sort, being unusually large, round, smooth, very meaty and crackless, not losing much weight in skinning, a repeater in fruiting, consequently a heavy picker each time, or in other words, a constant picker of a long drawn-out season. We have picked it 5 times at intervals of 10 days. That is 50 days of picking, which indicates that it is a dabster, a moneymaker. The habit of the plant is particularly hardy, being free from disease, both at stem and fruit. The Ohio Experimental Station in Bulletin Number 28, April 1918, reports the Bloomsdale as picking 18 tons per acre, in comparison with the Stone at 5.5 tons. What is a dabster?
Well, they have to explain it. Like, clearly it wasn't common parlance even then, because they have to explain it as a money maker. Let's figure that out. Dabster? It's like a music torrent downloading service. Okay. Dabster on Wiktionary. It's an expert, one who is a master of their profession, a handy person, a dabbler or bungler, like one who dabbles in something, but also a bungler, one who, fucks things up with their incompetence.
Yeah, that's sort of confusing.
Yeah, I agree.
Seems like nobody knew what it meant at any point.
Well, they defined it in line here, so it's a moneymaker. Normally, it's always surprising when in a catalog for any product, in a description, the copy shits on another product they sell. You get that a lot in this, but as I'm sure you've noticed, all the long, vivid, complimentary descriptions appear to be for products that are their own, like their own varieties or cultivars or whatever.
Yeah, tomatoes they have bred.
Right.
Yeah, there's one here called the Landreth that mentions in its product description, altogether it is more desirable than Chalk's Jewel and has proved a leader in every section where an early tomato is needed. And this is after 3 other entries that are ultimately you have to read Chalk's Jewel to know what they are. So Chalk's Jewel is a true standard.
Yeah, I'm going to read Landreth's Red Rock tomato. In large font under Landreth's Red Rock tomato, it says 1 week earlier than Stone, more productive than Stone. Of course, they also sell Stone, but I don't know how they could sell much of it with copy like this. There's an enormous picture of a Landreth's Red Rock tomato. And this is a black and white catalog, of course. It's hard to make out a lot of detail in it, but it's globular. And the picture is captioned, showing entire freedom from splits and small cavity at stem end. The description reads, as popular as ever, a surprisingly choice sort, exceedingly solid, or in other words, free from water, full of pectin, that is, a gum-like juice.
So gel, we're talking about gel.
Yeah, right, that's what they're talking about. You want your tomato to have good gel. Nothing like it in this respect. Shape round or full-bottomed, smooth as an apple. Apple-bottomed, even, I would say. Free from splits, small cavity at stem end, ripens all over, fruit borne in clusters. Vine very healthy, in other words, rust-resistant. It requires rich soil, far superior to Stone. A week earlier and more productive than Stone. The only variety with which it can be compared, as it is rounder, a deeper red, more solid or meaty, larger fruited, more showy, more productive, and earlier by a week. In other words, in all particulars, the Stoned is away behind it in the race. This is unquestionably so, as Landreth's Red Rock is undoubtedly the best large red medium early tomato in use. Beware of counterfeit stocks of Landreth's Red Rock, as only from Landreth's can it be secured in its original purity of so many great excellencies. It, like all other Landreth-grown tomatoes, can only be bought in sealed flat packets and sealed lithographed cardboard boxes of 1/4 and 1/2 pounds. So how much of a problem do you think counterfeit seeds were?
I have no idea, but I'm going to make a guess from this that Landreth's Red Rock was bred from Stone.
Sure.
So they think they've selected some qualities from Stone seed, or maybe they've crossed it with something. But it seems like they're basically selling this as an improved version of Stone, which is a tomato their customers are expected to know.
It is unquestionably so that in all particulars the Stone is away behind it in the race. Do you think counterfeit stocks would be Stone seeds being sold as Landreth's Red Rock?
I don't know how common counterfeit seeds were or are.
They make it seem like a huge problem.
I think it's a bigger problem. It's probably more often the case that people will sell old seeds repackaged as if they're new seeds or something like that. But I don't know, maybe there is a lot of seed fraud out there. Actually, a sort of popular college level biology lab exercise is fish fraud. I've seen some really cool
Is
posts.
that like when you order calamari, but instead of calamari, it's pig buttholes?
I think it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
Basically because seafood labeling in the US is a pretty...
It's a Wild West, I think.
Yeah. I wish I remembered if I ever knew who was the first person to do this, but in the last few years I've been hearing about this online. Basically, you can just go to a fish market or whatever, go to your fish counter, get a few pieces of fish, and then have your students check, like extract DNA and check, is this fish the species it's being advertised as?
Oh, that's
or
very cool.
are people being sold fraudulent fish?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is that happens with alarming frequency. Like the majority of fish is mislabeled.
I think it happens a lot. Yeah. So you're actually letting students apply something that they're learning in lab to the real world.
I love the idea of some sophomore in a chemistry lab looking up from a microscope and reporting dutifully that it is in fact pig butthole.
I don't know that I've heard any of those exact tales, but yeah, fish species fraud is certainly a thing. And I wonder if people could do DNA barcoding of seeds to see whether seed fraud is something that ever happened.
I mean, it's probably incredibly easy to get. I mean, we referenced in the opening here Stein selling like inferior low germination seeds in that lawsuit. It seems like the kind of thing that's very hard to prove because there's so much variability in conditions and like any particular batch you might get.
Yeah, I'm just sort of speculating. I mean, since there are academic labs breeding better tomatoes, I'm sure there are huge amounts of sequence data available for different tomato cultivars. I bet you could figure out if you were being sold a tomato that was a different cultivar than advertised, but I just don't see what the incentive would be for the seed company to do that.
Also, unlike like if you buy a counterfeit purse or whatever, someone with a good eye and experience in those things could know by looking at it. But if you're buying seeds, you probably wouldn't even suspect they're being counterfeit until they grew into the tomatoes themselves. So there's like that long gap.
Yeah, and I mean, you couldn't sell someone a counterfeit tomato that is supposed to be green or purple or something and then have it come out red. They would know immediately that they'd gotten the wrong seed.
Right. If it's pretty similar, though, like Landreths Red Rock and Stone, you might just think, well, I did a bad job growing it.
Yeah.
It's a good scam.
I just don't know if it is a good scam.
It doesn't seem like a profitable scam. So
I'm really struggling to see how you would benefit from running this scam. I mean, if, say, your Landreths Red Rock crop, your seed crop failed one year, but you knew that people wanted it so much that they wouldn't buy any other tomato, and you would lose orders if you didn't have any to offer. That's sort of the one
just
case.
pass Stone off.
Yeah.
But that's the fruit, though, not like the seed.
No, the seed. You have to grow the plants to get the seeds.
The seed. Yeah, that's true.
And seed crop failures are a big issue, especially for smaller seed companies.
Let's read a couple more. I'll say that, incidentally, throughout the catalog, the top of each page alternates with their slogan, "Seeds which succeed," and also, "To be satisfied, order from Landreth." Boy, if that's all it took to be satisfied.
Oh, here's actually the description of Stone, which is short and sweet. Stone, a very superior sort. A standard variety. No further information.
I mean, how is something simultaneously a very superior sort and a standard variety?
I guess they mean, again, that they would expect their customer to be familiar with it, and everybody agrees this is a good type of tomato. Everyone knows what this is, and they know it's good, and they like it. So they don't have to be sold on it.
Above that is the Landreth. This is another Landreths variety, although it is a very short description. Landreths TTT, or 10-ton tomato. The fruit in form is large. Wow, what a drawn-out way of saying a very simple thing.
Big fruit.
Big fruit. The fruit in form. As opposed to what? In concept? The fruit in form is large, slightly flattened at both stem and blossom ends. The skin smooth as an apple. Color blood red. The meat solid. It's another something compared to an apple situation, of course. I'll read the one right below this because I want to come back to it for another reason later on, but there's one called matchless. It's a large, half-flat, red, solid, productive, excellent. So keep that in mind for later on.
I'd like to read another short one. I think it sounds nice. Dwarf champion. Stems short, thick, stiff, almost self-supporting. Grows like a tree. Leaves very dark in color, much curled and twisted. Fruit borne in showy clusters, nearly round, solid red color with purple tint.
Man, a tomato tree sounds terrific.
Yeah, grows like a tree, leaves very dark in color, much curled and twisted I think it sounds like a great plant.
Yeah, I agree.
Landreths crown-picked globe. In our October list of seeds to market gardeners, we called special attention to the Landreths crown-picked globe tomato. We know the Landreths crown-picked to be something very fine as a shipper. We had it growing for seed almost alongside of the home office, so placed that we pay very special attention to it, besides being able to show it during the summer to all interested in the subject. A most remarkable crop, the admiration of every visitor. The merit of value for shipping of the Landreths globe as Landreths grow it is that it has very thick, tough outer skin and interior walls, fitting it especially to resist skinning on the one hand, or on the other, cracking or bursting in transportation, which resisting quality fits it for shipment to much longer distances than any other known sort. Don't forget this point as to its unusual, resisting quality against cracking and mashing in transportation.
Okay, hold on. So, the structure of that paragraph is, it's especially resistant to skinning and cracking and bursting in transportation. Don't forget this point as to its unusual resisting quality against cracking and mashing in transportation.
I mean, these sentences are some real tongue twisters.
Yeah.
First of all, and conceptually confusing also, I think.
Like,
not really. What they're trying to say is very simple, but they've chosen some syntax that wouldn't be common at all today. Let's put it that way.
Not common at all. There's a lot of redundancy. I mean, it's fun to read, certainly, because it sounds like the era it's from, but...
Yeah, it's also an interesting allocation of space. I haven't even finished the description of this one. And for others that we've read, it's maybe they get 5 words.
A very standard sort.
A very superior sort, a standard variety. Quite a contrast. The shape of the Landreths crown-picked globe is longer between the stem and blossom end than the measurement across the fruit. In other words, it is slightly oblong or olive-shaped. The color is a rosy red with never a split or spot. The Florida shippers send hundreds of cars of Landreths crown-picked globe to the northern markets, always a quick seller because of its resistant quality. Consequently, every tomato grower, no matter where located, who ships to a distance, can safely tie up to the Landreths crown-picked globe as undoubtedly most profitable for shippers, because the most resistant against injury of any kind, as jolting over rough roads, be they railroads or wagon roads. Too much cannot be said as to the merits of the Landreth crown-picked globe, but do not expect the same merits in seed not Landreths.
I would argue that too much was said about how they can be jostled in transit. This is 400 words about how you can jostle these in transit.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. I mean, there are others where we basically know none of their qualities, but they decided to tell you about this one particular quality of this one particular tomato for half a page. And that page contains 11 other tomato varieties.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's quite a ratio.
Yeah. You know, when it described the shape of this as a little oblong or olive-like, it made me think that there's a real omission of what is common these days of like cherry tomatoes, plum tomatoes. There is earlier on a plum-shaped red fruit 2 inches long by 1 inch diameter, which I guess is a plum tomato. But the sort of ratio of small to large tomatoes these days seems pretty skewed to small tomatoes. I mean, we like growing them more because they don't get fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, they're my preference because no matter how resistant to splitting a tomato claims to be, if you live in an environment where the rain is intermittently very heavy or non-existent, you're going to get some cracking.
Sure. I mean, these days, if you go to a grocery store, I would say conservatively half of the tomatoes present are going to be like a cherry tomato or grape tomato or something like that.
Well, but in a grocery store, there's basically only one kind of full-size tomato.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
tasteless,
because,
gnarly.
well, that's because they're fit for shipping.
Right.
And cherry tomatoes also ship better. So if you want a tomato that tastes like something that you buy in a grocery store, it has to be a smaller one.
There's one more I want to read. I know we're sort of leaning into the Landreths varieties, but those are the meatiest, no pun intended, descriptions. Landreths No Substitute tomato. Unusually productive. Very showy and distinctive both in vine and fruit. Not the old potato-leaved, but immeasurably superior. Vines spreading and vigorous, stems thick, leaves very dark and broad like potato, and often larger than a man's hand. The physical vigor of the plant is assured by its great breathing or lung power. Fruit brilliant red, full-sized, round or full at bottom or blossom end. Fruit free from cracks or core, and both fruit and vines very healthy. A very desirable sort. Ripening fruit earlier than Paragon, 1 week earlier than Stone, but by far a more showy sort. It is a variety of very superior excellence. Often larger than a man's hand.
That is a big tomato leaf, I'll say that.
Yeah.
I'd like to read Ponderosa.
Yeah, I thought you would.
Ponderosa. A monster purple fruit, quite rough, and containing very few seeds. Very choice, very meaty.
The font used in this catalog is of its time, but I think these days reads as very beautiful. Like this type of font is certainly in right now.
Yeah, it's very readable too.
Yeah.
I do not know what a rough tomato is, to be honest.
I don't know. But I was going to note that that line of the Ponderosa description is it's a larger font than all the text around it. A monster purple fruit, quite rough.
Yeah, well, they're putting on each line whatever the font size is, it continues.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that they're drawing attention to, they also start their descriptions in the same larger font as the tomato name.
Quite rough, though, yeah.
I don't know if that means, you know how some tomatoes have those ridges?
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that's what it means.
Do you think that's supposed to be good?
I mean, maybe they're just telling you what it is like.
You don't want to expect anything smooth with a Ponderosa.
I guess.
So a lot of times I'll look for some seed reviews online for a variety that we read about or dealt with today. And it got me interested in what seed varieties in this catalog are still being sold today. And so I sort of searched online for all the tomato varieties listed in this Landreths catalog, and a ton of them don't exist anymore or aren't sold anymore or have fallen by the wayside in one way or another.
Or have been renamed instead of still being sold as Landreths,
Right,
whatever.
yeah.
Maybe someone is selling them by another name.
Rebranded, yeah. And since there were those 3 really circular descriptions where Bonnie's Best is like John Bear, is like Chalk's Early Jewel, I was able to find Bonnie's Best tomato, which is sold by Baker Creek still, and I thought I'd read some reviews of it. First of all, they have a more substantial description than is in the Landreths catalog. It reads, "The famous old canning tomato that was selected out of Chalk's Early Jewel by George W. Middleton and introduced in 1908 by Walter P. Stokes Seed House. It became one of the most respected canning varieties in America in the first half of the 20th century. Medium-sized fruit is round, red, meaty, and loaded with flavor. A good producer that makes a fine slicer too. Becoming hard to find due to modern, flavorless hybrids." Here are some of the reviews for it on the Baker Creek site, which is, of course, rareseeds.com. Jess B says, "It's an excellent tomato." She gives it 5 stars overall, 5 stars in ease to grow, 3 stars in early maturity. And it reads, "Spring of 2016 was my first attempt at sowing directly into the ground or from seed. This was the only tomato plant from seed that I got to grow or produce, and produce it did. The thing was prolific. I had to use 4 stakes. It produced tomatoes right into an unseasonably warm November in northeastern Kansas. I would definitely recommend Tomatoes Were Delicious." Vintage Gardener says they love growing Bonnie Best. 4 stars overall, 4 stars for ease of growth, 4 stars for early maturity. And they say, "Last year I grew a dozen Bonnie Best plants, along with about 40 other varieties of heirloom tomatoes. I started them in the house well before our last frost, and planted them as I do every year, but in a new larger location. All my plants were looking wonderful until I noticed the leaves on some started to curl and turn yellow-brown. I believe my plants were hit with fusarium wilt, which is a soil-borne fungus that can affect and kill tomato plants. All my heirloom varieties bore some, but many of the varieties were killed completely. Bonnie Best did amazingly well. It showed no ill effects and produced beautiful, uniform, medium-sized tomatoes right up until frost. I then picked the unripe Bonnie Best tomatoes, covered with a towel, and let them ripen in the house. Despite the massive disappointment over the loss of so many other varieties of heirlooms, I was able to can over 50 quarts of delicious Bonnie Best tomatoes." They survived fusarium wilt, which is a thing I didn't know about. Do you know about fusarium wilt?
I do know about it.
Are you afraid of it? It
Well-
struck fear in Vintage Gardener's heart, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, no one wants that to happen to their tomatoes, certainly. I mean, I've never had a tomato plant just outright die, I don't think.
Hmm.
But that's because I only plant tomatoes that are very easy to grow, I think.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where I don't want to challenge myself. I want some good ass tomatoes, some apple bottom tomatoes, boots with the fur. I will say that the most recent review of the Bonnie Best tomato is from, looks like 2 weeks ago, from the reviewer First Time Florida Farmer. So, The review is titled, "No Good for Florida. Cannot stand up to Florida's pest pressure or heat. I have 20 varieties and they are almost all thriving despite the caterpillars and stink bugs. But poor Bonnie is just failing miserably."
Well, that's a pretty useful review, at least for me.
Yeah.
That's helpful to me.
I mean, it's saying that, and I think they're actually in Northeast Florida too. So this year, as of 2 weeks ago, in our part of Florida, Bonnie's Best doesn't grow well.
Well, I don't know that I'll ever grow a full-sized tomato again anyway, unless maybe it's a paste tomato.
Bria, with a review titled Grew These When I Was a Kid, says Bonnie's Best was the tomato for canning and fresh eating when I was a kid. We and our whole neighborhood grew them year after year, for they were the most popular home gardening tomato around back then. My mom and grandma canned these tomatoes for weeks at a time, whole, stewed, sauced. Our family was large and we counted on our garden to help feed us. Since we loved BLTs, fresh tomato sandwiches, spaghetti, American chop suey, stuffed peppers, and stuffed cabbage in tomato sauce, we grew around 30 tomato plants every year. I remember that these tomatoes grew thick and bushy with lots of tomatoes on them. Whenever we kids were hungry while playing, we'd just stop, snag a tomato, and munch away. Great tasting, good blend of sweet, tart flavor, juicy. I thought these were lost forever until I found them on Baker Creek's website. I mean, that's a terrific review. It really gets at the nostalgia of being a kid and just taking a fruit or vegetable right off the plant and munching it right then and there. Like, that's the dream, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I grew up. We had tomato gardens and we would just take a tomato and eat it while we were outside you could taste a little bit of the dirt on it.
Yeah. But I gotta ask what American chop suey is.
Oh,
Is it
man.
gross?
I know something about
It's
this,
gotta
but I
be
honestly
gross.
don't remember. It's like some New England thing. I'm surprised you don't know about it. I think it's a New England thing.
Let's see. Oh no. Oh, it's worse than I could have ever thought. It's like Hamburger Helper, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah,
Oh,
it's like
no.
some sort of a, like a New England version of hot dish or something. It's a thing that you make out of common ingredients that you sort of dump together. I think.
American chop suey is an American pasta casserole made with ground beef, macaroni, and a seasoned tomato sauce. Outside of New England, it's sometimes called American goulash or Johnny Marzetti. Despite its name, it only has a very distant relation to the chop suey of Chinese and American Chinese cuisine. Yeah, it has a...
I don't think there's any relation. I mean, it's
distant
food.
relation, yeah.
That's something.
They are both food. Damn, that looks nasty. I got a link to this. I can't believe that the Wikipedia picture for American chop suey, the perfect platonic ideal of American chop suey that they could depict, looks like this.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Oh wow.
I get the same.
Whoa.
It's sickening to me in the way that Cincinnati chili is.
Yeah, that's quite an image, I think.
All right, before we go, I mentioned that we'd come back to the matchless tomato that we read what was a very brief description of earlier. I looked into matchless, and it's actually a burpee invention. I guess it's unclear to me during this era what's a variety and what's a cultivar.
We went into a deep dive on that, and I honestly don't
still doesn't make
remember.
any sense to me. But it was a Burpees 1889, let's say cultivar. Why not? Actually found.
I mean, I think a cultivar is just a version of a plant that has specific characteristics.
Oh, God, that's confusing. But yeah, it's the Burpees product that they originated in 1889. And I found a 1914 Burpee catalog description of this seed, which I'll read to you. Burpees matchless is a strong, vigorous grower with thrifty vines, which produce large, handsome tomatoes most abundantly throughout the season. The fruits, of a rich cardinal red, are remarkably solid and smooth, free from core, and uniformly of the finest flavor. The tomatoes are always of the largest size. They do not become smaller, even late in the season, as the healthy growth of vine and foliage carry magnificent crops until they are killed by frost. After the vines have been killed by frost, we've repeatedly noticed that the full-grown green tomatoes remaining were fully as large as the ripe fruits gathered during the season. For tomatoes of the largest size, always perfectly smooth, firm, and handsome, long-keeping qualities and finest flavor, we say without fear of contradiction that there is no scarlet-fruited tomato the equal of Burpee's Matchless. So they could really write some copy back in the day.
Yeah, that sounded great.
I know, it's fucking great, right? So you can still get these from some companies. They're not widely available. You can get them from Victory Seeds, which seems to have like a large amount of this era seeds still available. You can get them from a company I didn't know about called Renaissance Farms, which incidentally is a Black-owned seed company that maybe you should check out. They're renaissancefarms.org. It's owned by Curtis Jackson. This is neither here nor there, but you check out their site. He puts a really interesting watermark over all of these seed pictures that I really like. It's a cartoon of a man holding a guitar. Check it out. They seem great. But oddly enough, this seed is not offered by Burpee.
They've moved on.
They've moved on from their own matchless seed.
I mean, their deal is probably, they have to keep introducing new varieties. They want to sell something that's been improved somehow.
Well, what you can get on the Burpee site these days, if you go and look at their homepage at this moment, is a free Burpee hat with $50 or more gift card purchase. Use code Father's Day 50 for a $50 gift card.
Wow.
So that's where Burpee is. If your dad wants this Burpee hat,
dads do want tomato seeds.
Is that what dads want?
I think so.
Well, Burpee knows. All right. Well, if you are so inclined, you can follow us on Twitter at @CDBusiness, on Instagram at CDBusinessPod. You can email us at cdbusinesspod@gmail.com. Rate us ideally poorly, review us ideally poorly on iTunes. And assuming they're not afflicted by a fumarium fungus.
Fusarium wilt.
And assuming they're not afflicted by a fusarium wilt, you should probably eat your vegetables.
We're all just doing the best we can.
Speak for yourself.
It's seedy business. It's seedy business. Boring talk about seeds, seedy talk between boys. Mind-numbing chatter about ovules and spores. We'll dig a ditch and we'll moan and split the difference. It's seedy business.